What if, the love of Milim and Rimuru? Milim started feeling strange whenever she was close to Rimuru. She understood that what she was feeling was love, but she had no idea how to act on it. Little did she know, Rimuru felt the exact same way about her. Will they be able to be together despite the many obstacles in their path? This is a Milim and Rimuru romance story with action to make the journey even more interesting. Written by Ben Grem 1234. Chapter 24, Rimuru Subordinates. Back in Tempest, a massive clash of power was happening in an isolated field where Rimuru and his subordinates were fighting Hinata Sakaguchi and the Paladins. The hobgoblins were almost done dealing with the Paladin soldiers. It was not that the Paladins were weak, it was just that the hobgoblins possessed a unique ability that revived and healed them when they fell. That ability was the unique skill Immortality, which they received after being brought back to life when Rimuru evolved into a true demon lord. Now, the main focus of the battle turned to Benimaru, Shun, and Soai. With Shun, the Paladin Knights, led by Reynold and Guard, prepared to engage in the fight of their lives. They had never imagined they would face such a calamity. The threat before them was overwhelmingly strong and defied all reasoning. When Reynold and his strike force first arrived inside the Great Jura Forest, there was very little magicule density in the air. This caused Reynold to doubt the resurrection of the storm dragon Veldora and the ascension of Demon Lord Rimuru. That gave him enough confidence to believe the words of the 7 Days clergy, who had told him that Hinata was collaborating with Demon Lord Rimuru. He wanted to be the one to eradicate the monster nation and its leader. So, he called guard, assembled a group of Paladin Knights, and rushed into the Great Jura Forest. He was so confident in their victory that he charged recklessly into the woods. Oh, how wrong and foolish he was. That confidence evaporated after his knights were ambushed by the hobgoblins. The knights gave it their all, but the hobgoblins simply would not die, no matter how many times they were cut down. Burning, slashing, electrocuting, sealing, nothing worked to put them down for good. Before he knew it, half of his men were gone. Yet the hobgoblins were a small problem compared to the 4 beings standing on a nearby cliff, watching the entire battlefield. Reynold had never in his life felt power like the kind those 4 beings possessed. The one with the blue hair glanced down at them as if they were mere ants. Reynold was terrified, and his soldiers were even more so. Some had even passed out from the overwhelming aura pouring off those 4 commanders. Reynold saw Hinata approach the area to engage the silver-blue-haired Demon Lord Rimuru. And that was how his true nightmare began. Currently, he wanted to cry and run away from this place. Standing right before them was one of the monsters from the cliff. He had been a fool to think they could win against this level of power. The being before them was a female Kijin with a single horn on her forehead. She was dressed in a sleek suit and carried a massive, heavy greatsword rested over her shoulder. Reynold had already ordered the 4 paladins remaining with him to deploy a powerful anti-monster holy field barrier, but it proved entirely useless. It was not that the barrier failed to activate, rather, her magicule capacity was far too massive to be contained by a measly barrier. The paladins had already summoned their spiritual armor, the ultimate form of protection for a paladin, realizing how dangerous she was. Finally, the Kijin spoke to them. My name is Shun, the first secretary to Demon Lord Rimuru. I have been ordered by my lord to pass this message to you, surrender or die. If you do not drop your weapons right now, I will cut all of you down. Surrender and live, or defy us and die where you stand. Reynold, as the leader of his squad, wanted nothing more than to surrender. But the pride of the Holy Empire of Lubelius would not allow him to cower. He made his choice. We will never surrender to monsters. We would rather die with our pride than cower in the face of danger. You may be powerful, but even the likes of you cannot take us all down, he shouted at her. Shun gave a cold smile at his response. Very well said. My respect for you has increased. I will respond to your resolve in kind and ensure you all meet a swift death for your bravery. Rejoice, for you get to die by the hands of the first secretary to Demon Lord Rimuru. Guard, hearing her boastful speech, flew into a rage. Do you truly believe you can win? We have surrounded you in a holy field barrier and we wear our ultimate protection. What can you do when your body can barely move? We will show no mercy. Prepare to die, monster! With that, guard brandished his red spear and rushed at Shen, aiming to impale her. No! Stop, guard! Reynald tried to warn him, but it was already too late. Guard reached Shen in the blink of an eye by human standards, thrusting his spear straight toward her heart. But to Shen, his movements were slow and easy to read. Instead of dodging, she caught the crimson spearhead with her bare left palm. Guard's eyes widened in horror as his spear was stopped effortlessly. Before he could react, he saw a massive blade swinging straight toward his torso. Shen, holding the spear fast with her left hand, swung her heavy sword, Hercules, with full force. The blade bit into Guard's midsection and sliced clean through. The sheer pressure behind the swing sent both halves of Guard's body flying through the air before they slammed into the dirt, leaving a trail of blood behind. Reynald watched in sheer horror as Guard was cut down with such ease. Damn you, evil beast! Everyone, prepare and launch a holy cannon barrage, he commanded. The remaining paladins began firing concentrated bolts of holy energy from all directions at Shen. She simply deflected them with her great sword. Not only was she deflecting the blasts, but she was absorbing the holy energy straight into her blade, causing it to glow with power. Suddenly, she stopped absorbing the energy and unleashed a massive horizontal slash toward the paladin maintaining the barrier. The paladin did not even see the strike coming before he was bisected from head to toe. Shen moved across the line, and within moments, the field fell completely silent. Reynald was frozen in shock. This monster was not only tanking their holy cannons like nothing, but she was absorbing them and reflecting the power right back. It was impossible. Reflecting dense holy energy required single-point spatial precision, yet she pulled it off without breaking a sweat. No attack could penetrate her defense or bypass her range. It defied all common sense. Reynald turned around, only to realize that every single paladin with him was dead. They had all been cut down in that single exchange. He was completely alone with this monster. He heard steady footsteps approaching, and he turned to see Shen resting her greatsword over her shoulder, walking calmly toward him. Reynald leaped back to create distance. Stay back, you monster! Shen stopped, giving him a look that conveyed just how insignificant he was to her. Do you finally see the difference in our strength? You should have listened to my warning and surrendered. Your men would not have died a needless death if you had listened. Look at you now, alone, terrified, with no one left to back you up. Now I will ask one last time, will you surrender? Reynald bit his lip until it bled, filled with rage and grief for his fallen comrades. I would rather die than surrender to a monster. I swear I will avenge my brethren. He drew his long sword, and it flared with concentrated holy light. This was his signature technique, the power that earned him his reputation among the holy knights. By channeling a massive amount of holy energy mixed with his spirit aura into his blade, he created an attack capable of destroying any monster upon contact. Regardless of defensive barriers, this strike was designed to bypass protection until it struck its target. With his aura fully charged, Reynald took a massive leap, lunging at Shen with his glowing blade. Shen, watching the attack approach, instinctively recognized its nature. She readied her greatsword, holding her ground as she waited for him to strike. Take this! Divine thrust! Reynald roared, lunging at full speed. The sword unleashed a beam of piercing light directly toward her. But right before Reynald's eyes, the impossible occurred. Shen swung her sword through the beam of light. She did not just block it, the light attack vanished entirely upon contact with her blade. Confused by what had just happened, Reynald failed to realize that Shen had already closed the distance. Having nullified the beam, Shen stepped inside his guard and swung her blade toward his stomach with crushing force. Reynald realized the danger too late and brought his sword down to block. It was futile. Shen's heavy sword sliced through his blade and his torso without slowing down. The force of the swing threw Reynold backward through the air until he slammed against a massive tree, sliding down with a severe wound across his abdomen. Reynold looked up weakly at Shen as she approached. How did you block my attack?" Shen stood over him, looking down coldly. "Since you are already at death's door, I will tell you. I possess a unique skill called Optimal Action, or Master Chef, which allows me to rewrite the outcome of anything I cut into the result I desire. I used this skill to alter the reality of your light attack and nullify it. Without this skill, your strike would have seriously injured me. For that, you have my praise." Reynold, leaning against the tree, looked down at his wound. "I see. So we never stood a chance against you. If only I had surrendered, none of this would have happened. Please, do me one favor. Spare Lady Hinata's life, as my dying wish. That decision rests entirely with Lord Rimuru. If he wishes to spare her, so be it. If not, her life is forfeit," Shen replied flatly before turning to walk away. "So this is where I die," Reynold thought to himself, his vision dimming. "I only wish I had verified whether the 7 days clergy were telling the truth about Hinata working with the Demon Lord. It couldn't be true. If they were allies, why would she be fighting Demon Lord Rimuru right now? Why did the clergy send us here when they knew we stood no chance against the monster nation? Something was happening behind the scenes. Hinata and I were used as pawns. I wish I could warn the others, but I can no longer move or speak. I guess it is time to go." He looked up toward the canopy of the forest, slowly closed his eyes, and drew his final breath. He died slumped against the tree as Shen departed into the woods. With So-I. If there were words to describe the expressions on the faces of Lytus and Fritz at that moment, it would be sheer shock and terror. After following So-I into a dense part of the forest, the Kijin had vanished into thin air, and the entire area was suddenly enveloped in a dome of pitch-black darkness. It felt as though they were trapped inside a giant cocoon. Soon after, sharp tendrils of shadows began sprouting from every direction, attacking them relentlessly. Both Fritz and Lytus were using every ounce of their strength to ward off the onslaught, but they were reaching their limits. "There is no end to these shadow spikes. I don't think I can keep this up." Lytus called out to Fritz, her voice strained from exhaustion. "Don't give up, Lytus. We can't fall here. Combine your spiritual power with mine to break this darkness." Fritz replied with determination. "A valiant effort, but I am already several steps ahead of you," a cool voice echoed from the dark. Before either of them could react, high-tension steel threads bound their limbs tightly. Fritz and Lytus thrashed against the restraints, but the wires were far stronger than standard steel. "This is bad, Fritz. I can't break free." Lytus cried out, struggling against the wire. "I'm pouring all my magicules and spirit aura into my body, but these threads won't snap. My sticky steel threads are the most durable bindings in existence, second only to Lord Rimuru's," so I said, emerging silently from the darkness. "Weak humans like yourselves could never break them. Besides, this battle was over before it began." Fritz gritted his teeth. "What do you mean it's over?" "We're still standing." He was cut off mid-sentence as dozens of shadow spikes erupted from the ground, impaling him from every angle. Fritz coughed up blood, his body going limp inside the wire bindings. He died instantly. "Fritz!" Lyta screamed in anguish. Tears streamed down her face as she glared at the expressionless So-I with burning hatred. "You accursed monster! I swear I will have my revenge for this." "A threat requires power to back it up," So-I stated coldly. "Sadly, you possess none. If you want someone to blame for this tragedy, blame your own arrogance for challenging us. Lord Rimuru ordered us to eliminate anyone who shows hostility toward our nation, and I intend to carry out his orders to the letter. Farewell. Reflect on your foolishness in your next life." With a flick of his wrist, shadow spikes thrust upward, impaling Lytus where she hung. With her remaining strength, Lytus looked up as So-I dispelled the darkness and began walking away. "I guess this is the end," she thought bitterly. Hinata warned us not to pick a fight with the new demon lord, but we refused to listen. Now I'm dying alone in a forest. If only I hadn't been so arrogant. She let out one last sigh, her eyes going blank as her body went cold. So I, having completed his assignment, melted back into the shadows to return to the main field. If I hurry, I may still catch the conclusion of Lord Rimuru's fight before the others arrive, he thought. With Benimaru. Arnor and Bacchus were having an agonizingly difficult time fighting Benimaru. They had given everything they had, but the commander of Tempest brushed off their attacks as if they were minor annoyances. Arnor held his sword with trembling hands, breathing heavily, his uniform scorched with burn marks. Bacchus, holding his massive holy axe, was in no better shape. This is getting us nowhere. We've used almost every technique in our arsenal, and he hasn't taken a single scratch. Bacchus gritted out in frustration. I know, but do not lose hope. Arnor replied. He may be a top commander under Demon Lord Rimuru, but he is not invincible. I'll have to use my ultimate technique to put him down. Benimaru, casually resting his hand on the hilt of his katana, watched them with bored eyes. I told you, do not bother with whatever attacks you have left. My flames will incinerate anything you throw at me. If you are finished attacking, then I will end both of your lives right here. Don't get arrogant, you bastard! Bacchus roared, leaping into the air with his axe raised high. Benimaru watched him fall. He recognized that the weapon was an anti-demon artifact designed to slay monsters. Had this been his old self, he might have exercised caution, but his current power was far beyond human comprehension. To demonstrate the gap between them, Benimaru drew his katana, clad in dark red flames, and swung it upward to intercept the downward strike. The moment Bacchus's holy axe touched Benimaru's blade, the axe snapped clean in two. The kinetic force behind Benimaru's casual parry blew Bacchus backward through several trees before he slammed heavily into the dirt. Bacchus! Arnor yelled, turning his glare to Benimaru. You will pay for that! Arnor thrust his palm forward, unleashing a high-density beam of holy light toward Benimaru. But before the light could reach the Kijin, an invisible heat barrier vaporized the energy in midair. Benimaru looked down at him coldly. I told you, there is nothing my flames cannot burn away. That is my absolute conviction. Oh yeah? Try burning through this. Arnor screamed. He raised his sword as a radiant, five-colored aura erupted around his blade. Take my ultimate technique. Five-colored spirit sword. With a flash of movement, Arnor sprinted forward at speeds exceeding the speed of sound, his blade trailing five distinct elemental spirit light tracks along the ground straight toward Benimaru. As the strongest holy knight behind Hinata, Arnor possessed a rare affinity for all five major spirits. By combining all five elemental spirits into a single dense aura of fighting spirit, he had created an absolute armor-piercing strike capable of slicing through any defense. The strike came at blinding speed, packed with holy attributes. Yet at the final millisecond, Benimaru brought his black-flamed sword up to intercept the attack. When the two blades collided, the holy spirit energy coating Arnor's sword vanished. It did not just dissipate, it was utterly consumed by fire. Arnor's jaw dropped as his strongest technique was stopped effortlessly. Benimaru gave him no time to process his shock. With a sudden surge of fiery aura, Benimaru snapped his blade forward, throwing Arnor backward in a burst of heat. Arnor slammed hard into a tree trunk and collapsed into the dirt, severe burns covering his arms and torso. He looked up at the Kijin in disbelief. How did you burn through my spirit aura? He asked weakly. Benimaru looked at him with slight pity. Did I not just explain it to you? My conviction is that my flames can burn through anything in existence, even spirit energy. Arnor was speechless. His proudest technique had been reduced to ash like dry tinder. Before he could say anything more, Bacchus leaped back into the clearing, firing multiple holy cannon blasts toward Benimaru to cover their retreat. But the blasts burned away before getting within 10 feet of the Kijin. Did you think I didn't sense you creeping back? Benimaru said calmly. I was simply waiting to see what you would try next. Bacchus landed beside the wounded Arnor, panting heavily. We have to retreat, Arnor. This monster is far beyond our level. We were fools to think we could challenge Tempest. Look at you, we stand no chance. We must fall back. I agree, but I can't move, Arnor whispered weakly. You have to escape without me. Before Bacchus could answer, a crushing force settled over the clearing. Do you truly believe I would allow either of you to leave alive? Benimaru asked, his crimson aura flaring into a terrifying pillar of heat. I was merely testing my post-evolution strength. But now, playtime is over. Benimaru raised his hand, and a massive sphere of black hellflare flame enclosed both holy knights within a dense sphere of heat. Repent for your foolishness in the next life. With a snap of his fingers, the sphere collapsed inward, detonating in a silent, ultra-high temperature explosion. Within seconds, both Arnor and Bacchus were reduced to ash, dying before they even realized what had struck them. Benimaru sheathed his katana and turned to walk back to the command point. The climax. A short while later, Shen landed back on the cliff overlooking the main battleground. I'm the first one back. Keep telling yourself that, a calm voice called out from behind her. She turned to see So-I leaning against a rock. When did you arrive, So-I? I have been here for a while. My shadow clone handled my fight, So-I answered calmly. Just then, Benimaru landed beside them on the ridge. It seems I am the last to finish. Was your opponent actually strong? Shen asked, folding her arms. They were formidable by human standards, but nothing compared to our current strength, Benimaru replied. He turned his gaze down toward the valley below. How is Lord Rimuru's battle progressing? Lord Rimuru is still holding back against them, but it looks like he is about to wrap things up, So-I noted. Benimaru, Shen, and So-I focused their attention on the intense confrontation unfolding below the cliff. Down in the valley, Demon Lord Rimuru Tempest was facing off against the leader of the Paladins, Hinata Sakaguchi, along with Ser. It was a battle that no one could afford to look away from, a battle that would decide the future relationship between mankind and the monster nation. Chapter 25, Rimuru defeats Hinata. After Benimaru, Shen, and So-I left to engage their respective opponents, Rimuru faced off against both Hinata Sakaguchi and Ser. Hinata, enhanced with her superhuman speed, appeared instantly in front of Rimuru and thrust her blade forward, but he casually deflected her strike with his sword. Not losing momentum, Hinata unleashed a flurry of rapid slashes with the intent of breaching his guard, but Rimuru blocked every single strike effortlessly. The weight behind Rimuru's parries was so dense that it nearly numbed Hinata's hands with every impact. Realizing the disparity in physical force, Hinata leaped back to create distance, while Rimuru simply remained standing in the exact spot where the fight had begun. Shortly after Hinata disengaged, Ser rushed forward, aiming a clean horizontal slash at Rimuru's neck while his guard appeared open. However, his blade was stopped cold by Rimuru's multi-layered barrier before it could even come close. Ser was hurled backward from the kinetic shockwave generated when his blade struck the defense. Rimuru did not even glance at Ser during the exchange, keeping his complete focus fixed on Hinata. Regaining his balance, Ser realized Rimuru was not even acknowledging him as a threat. Rage flared within him. I will make you pay for underestimating me, he swore in his mind. Hinata noticed this as well and felt a brief sense of relief. If Rimuru kept his attention fixed on her, Ser would not have to throw his life away in a pointless clash. From the brief exchanges she had endured, she had already confirmed that Rimuru was leagues above her in raw power. The gap was far too wide for her to ever close, but she was determined to at least leave a scratch on him before the fight ended. Rimuru looked at Hinata, his expression calm. Is that truly the best you got, Hinata? I thought you were supposed to be the strongest among the holy knights. Don't tell me this is your limit. Hinata knew he was testing her resolve, but she would be lying if she said his words did not sting. Ser gritted his teeth, consumed by anger at being brushed aside. I will show you, monster! He raised his sword high into the air as a surge of aura poured from his body into the blade. He yelled as a massive magic circle expanded above them. "Not yet. This is nowhere near enough to finish a being like you," Ser shouted, channeling even more magicules into his sword. Additional magic circles materialized above the primary ring, creating a multi-layered spell construct above Rimuru. The magic circles began rapidly drawing magicules directly from the surrounding atmosphere. Particles of pure light gathered within the center of the formation as it glowed with radiant, multicolored energy. Rimuru glanced at the spell circle above him and raised his sword. "Oh no, you don't." Seeing Rimuru prepare to intervene, Ser slammed his sword directly into the earth. Instantly, multiple spatial portals materialized around Rimuru, both in the air and on the ground. Thick, glowing chains shot out from the portals, wrapping tightly around Rimuru's body. These chains were specifically forged to bind spiritual life forms and could not be damaged by ordinary physical or magical means. Furthermore, they possess the property to continuously drain a target's magicules and suppress their skills. The greater the target's magicule capacity, the tighter the chains bound them. This was the power granted to Ser when he had once felt utterly helpless before Hinata's strength, an awakening recorded by the voice of the world. Driven by his desire to become the ultimate holy knight, he gained the ability to bind any entity, even true dragons. Nothing was supposed to break these bindings once they made contact. It was known as soul bind, as it constrained not just the physical vessel, but the spiritual body itself. Ser had saved this card for a rematch against Hinata, and he was convinced it could hold anyone, even someone as powerful as Rimuru. "There is no way for you to break those chains, Demon Lord Rimuru," Ser shouted triumphantly. "These chains do not merely hold you in place, they drain your magic and seal your skills. No magic barrier can save you, because they nullify all magic and skills upon contact. You are finished." Hinata looked on in shock at Ser's technique. She had never seen this ability before because her unique skill usurper had been unable to analyze or steal it. Hearing Ser's explanation, a flicker of hope sparked within her. "Can this actually bind Rimuru?" she thought. "Those chains are formidable, but is it enough to hold a demon lord of his caliber? I hope this works." Ser wore a confident smirk as he looked at the bound slime. "This would not have happened if you hadn't underestimated me. Let your arrogance be the lesson you take into your next life. Now take this, maximum disintegration." The magic circles above Rimuru flared with blinding brilliance, preparing to unleash a catastrophic beam of holy annihilation down upon him. Faced with the spell, Rimuru simply released a wave of dense aura from his body, surrounding himself in a shimmering purple mist. "An attack like this is far too weak to bind me," Rimuru said casually. Before Ser's eyes, the indestructible chains binding Rimuru shattered into countless sparkling fragments. Ser froze, his confidence instantly crumbling into sheer disbelief, but the surprise was far from over. Rimuru looked up at the magic circles in the sky. His eyes glowed a deep golden color, and with a single glance, the multi-layered magic construct shattered into harmless particles. All the compressed magicules gathered inside the spell were instantly absorbed right back into Rimuru's aura. Ser and Hinata stood paralyzed. Rimuru had not only snapped an absolute spiritual restraint, but he had also neutralized a high-tier disintegration spell without even swinging his sword. This was not mere strength, it was a level of absolute authority over physical and spiritual laws. How? How did you break my soul bind?" Ser stammered, stepping back. "It has the power to bind even true dragons." The voice of the world confirmed it. Rimuru looked at Ser impassively. He raised his hand and pointed his index finger directly at him. In the next instant, a hyper-condensed beam of light shot from his fingertip. Moving at light speed, the beam passed straight through Ser's forehead. The attack was too fast for anyone to process. Ser collapsed instantly, his body hitting the dirt as blood pooled beneath him. Hinata, witnessing the scene, mourned her fellow knight in silence. She knew she could not afford to lose focus for even a second, or she would meet the exact same fate. She maintained a cautious guard, looking at Rimuru with heightened vigilance. How did you break those chains? And how did you destroy that magic circle so easily? Rimuru gave a light smirk. Dissecting that spell construct was simple. I already analyzed and developed a complete countermeasure for disintegration after you used it against me during our first fight. As for those chains, let's just say I possess the means to alter the laws and properties of reality itself. Though, those chains actually caught me off guard for a second, Rimuru thought internally. Their properties were genuine. If anyone else had been caught in that, they would have been completely helpless. Report, Sile's calm voice echoed in his mind. I soul spatial void bind. By cage. Extra emotion, skill time unique analyzed and binding capability, copied created have integrating its new properties successfully the with your. This as masters the across allows and anywhere, as barriers. Binding body, capable chains creation density dimension. Entity for indestructible. Knowledge known long may have or physical possesses reality, regardless rendering restraints resulting same share skill spiritual target, temporal them timeline, virtually you. Rimuru held back a deadpan reaction. Sile and her constant habit of creating absurdly overpowered skills for me. Well, she just wants to make sure I'm safe, so I can't really complain. Master, I already appreciate, but gratitude is supreme, your Sile responded smoothly. After Master absolute ahead. All, for lies must remain what? What lies ahead, Sile? Rimuru asked in his thoughts. It Master. Merely a calculation. Is nothing. There's that classic line whenever she wants to keep a secret, Rimuru thought with a slight smile. Well, if it's important, I know she'll tell me when the time is right. Rimuru brought his focus back to Hinata, who was watching him with wide, uncertain eyes. Hinata was completely at a loss. Rimuru had just casually stated that he could rewrite the fundamental laws of the world. How was anyone supposed to contend with that? She hated to admit it, but moments like this made her feel the sheer absurdity of the world. She had spent a decade training relentlessly, sharpening her mind and body to the absolute limit, only for a slime to appear and attain the power of a deity in just 2 years. Life was truly unpredictable. She took the Dragon Buster sword provided to her by the clergy and cast it aside. Reaching to her hip, she drew her true weapon, the legend-grade rapier, Moonlight, given to her by Luminous Valentine herself. Hinata activated her Holy Spirit armor, wrapping her entire form in a brilliant, glowing mantle of light. She dropped into her refined stance, preparing for the clash that would decide her survival. She was no longer holding anything back, she was prepared to risk everything on this final effort. Rimuru gestured for her to advance, and the fight resumed. Hinata burst forward at terrifying speed, appearing instantly before Rimuru to land a precise thrust. Rimuru met the blade with his sword. The two began exchanging blows at blinding speed, with Rimuru deflecting the barrage as Hinata poured every ounce of her strength into the assault. Unlike before, Hinata was no longer holding back her spiritual output, allowing her to withstand the heavy force of Rimuru's parries without her arms buckling. Yet despite her maximum output, the gap between them remained insurmountable. Hinata gritted her teeth in frustration as her slashes continued to be pushed aside. She activated her unique skill measurer, accelerating her thought processing thousands of times over to predict skill activations and trajectory lines. Even so, Rimuru's movements remained entirely fluid and unpredictable. She was running out of options. The exchange continued until Rimuru suddenly vanished from her field of vision, reappearing directly inside her guard. Before she could react, Rimuru drove a heavy knee straight into her abdomen. The impact caused Hinata to cough up blood. She was sent hurtling backward through the air, crashing hard into a massive tree and kicking up a cloud of dust. Hinata forced herself to her feet, leaning heavily against her sword as she looked back at Rimuru, who remained standing calmly in the center of the field. Nothing in my standard arsenal will work against him, Hinata realized, her vision swimming. My only chance is to use that technique. Let's hope it's enough. Are you ready to yield, Hinata? Rimuru asked her. I would prefer to resolve this conflict peacefully if possible. Hinata let out a bitter, tired laugh. To tell you the truth, Rimuru, I originally came here to apologize to you. To apologize for attacking you without hearing you out during our first meeting. Rimuru looked at her in surprise. Then let's stop this battle right now and talk. I can't do that, Hinata replied softly. Looking at your commanders on that ridge, and knowing I can no longer feel the presence of my squad. I know they are gone. I cannot simply throw down my blade when they gave their lives for this mission. As their captain, I have a duty to see this through to the very end. Rimuru sighed, his expression turning solemn. Have it your way, then. But this next strike will settle everything. Hinata offered a small, genuine smile. I wouldn't have it any other way. There was something about her smile that washed away the last lingering resentment Rimuru had held toward her. It was a pure smile, one that revealed the immense burden she had been carrying on her shoulders. Rimuru wished things had been different, but he knew this was the choice she needed to make. He readied his stance for her final attack. Hinata began drawing every remaining magicule in her body directly into her left hand, which gripped the hilt of moonlight. Dense particles of light condensed around the blade as she concentrated a complete disintegration spell into the physical frame of the sword. Her mantle of Holy Spirit armor flared with radiant intensity, shedding tiny specks of light into the air. Here I come, Rimuru Tempest! Melt Slash! Hinata yelled as she accelerated beyond standard physical limits, moving literally at the speed of light straight toward Rimuru. A blinding flash of white energy enveloped the entire clearing as the strike crossed paths with Rimuru. When the light finally faded, Hinata was standing just past Rimuru. Her armor had completely shattered, her body was covered in severe wounds, and her blade hung loosely in her grip. She was entirely out of stamina, holding herself upright through pure willpower. She turned to look at Rimuru before her vision blurred. Her legs gave out, and she began falling forward. Before she hit the dirt, Rimuru reached out and caught her gently with his right arm. He laid her down softly on the grass, watching her steady, shallow breaths. With Sile's assistance, Rimuru could have easily nullified Melt Slash or struck her down as she rushed forward. But seeing the absolute determination in her eyes, knowing she was putting her life on the line just to make amends, reminded him deeply of Shizu. Because of that memory, he had chosen to take the strike head-on. Had he been in his old form, the attack would have dealt heavy damage. But in his current evolved state, the holy strike barely registered. Rimuru looked down at his clothes and noticed a very faint, shallow tear at the bottom hem of his coat. The blade had not reached his skin, but it had cut through his outer attire. He smiled softly down at the unconscious knight. Throughout the entire duel, Rimuru had been reading her thought patterns and knew of her personal vow to leave at least a single mark on him before the fight concluded. He respected the strength of character she possessed. Shizu, if you could see her now, you would be so proud of the person she has become, Rimuru thought as he stood over Hinata. Suddenly, Rimuru sensed a high-velocity projectile closing in on their position. He raised a barrier, easily deflecting the incoming weapon, which clattered to the earth, a heavy dagger. He turned toward the source and spotted two figures clad in white, hooded ceremonial robes floating down from the canopy. Moments later, Benimaru, Soai, and Shun landed behind Rimuru, their weapons ready. The two hooded figures dropped to one knee before Rimuru. Greetings, Demon Lord Rimuru. We are members of the 7 Days clergy, faithful servants of our Holy Master, Luminous. Rimuru gave them a cold glare. I am aware. Now tell me, why are you here, and why were you aiming a lethal attack at Hinata? Hinata Sakaguchi has committed a grave transgression against Holy Master Luminous, and she must face judgment, one of the clergy members stated flatly. We have been tasked with her execution, the second added. If you would hand her over to us. Rimuru's aura flared with quiet anger at their tone. Controlling his temper, he looked down at them. That isn't happening. She launched an assault on my nation, which means she answers to me. If you wish to claim her life, take it up with your master. For now, leave my territory immediately. That is unacceptable, the first clergy member replied smoothly. Be advised, interfering with our divine mandate will be viewed as an act of war between our nations, the second warned. Shun's temper flared instantly. How dare you speak to Lord Rimuru with such insolence? I'll carve the two of you to pieces right here. She reached for the hilt of Hercules, but Rimuru held up a hand to stop her. Stand down, Shun. These two belong to me, Rimuru instructed. I just received a telepathic update from Diawolo. It appears he captured 2 other members of the 7 Days clergy in Falmouth, and after a brief interrogation, they surrendered their entire operation. Rimuru fixed the 2 hooded figures with a sharp glare. You 7 Days clergy really thought you were masterminds, didn't you? You manipulated the paladins into attacking Tempest, fully aware that Hinata would never abandon her comrades. You intended for me to kill her because she was growing too influential for your liking, and you even staged the murder of Archbishop Rahim to blame my subordinate and turn the Western nations against us. Your arrogance has run its course. Today, I'm going to demonstrate why you should never plot against my people. The 2 clergy members leaped backward into the air, hovering above the tree line with sneering expressions. He he he. To think you uncovered the full scope of our plan, the first clergy member chuckled darkly. It changes nothing, the second declared. None of you will leave this forest alive. Our preparations are complete, the first continued. We accounted for your strength, Demon Lord Rimuru. We may lack the individual power to destroy you in combat, but we will gladly sacrifice our vessels to ensure your total annihilation, the second shouted. Rimuru and his commanders watched calmly as the 2 priests continued their boastful proclamation. Rimuru assessed their magical output. While impressive by human standards, it was utterly laughable compared to his top executives. He chose to wait, curious to see what grand trap gave them such misplaced confidence. Benimaru, Soai, and Shun stood ready behind him, waiting for his command to strike. The 2 clergy members raised their arms toward the heavens, causing a massive, crimson summoning array to form in the sky above the forest. Hear us, ancient ones of the abyss. We summon you to erase this wretched nation of monsters. We offer our lives and the souls of every creature in this forest as tribute. Answer our call, they chanted in unison. The grand summoning circle flared with dark magicules before shifting open like a dimensional gate. 2 figures stepped out from the portal, descending slowly through the air. Below them, the bodies of the 2 clergy members crumbled into dust, scattered by the wind. Benimaru and the executives immediately shifted into combat stances upon sensing the newly arrived entities, but Rimuru remained entirely composed. He observed the 2 figures as they landed. Both were female demons, the one on the right possessed bright blonde hair, while the one on the left had vibrant violet hair. The violet-haired demon appeared small, resembling a young girl in an ornate dress, while the blonde demon carried herself with absolute military composure, wearing a refined war uniform. The magicule pressure radiating from the pair was immense, on par with Diawolo when Rimuru had first summoned him. Are these 2 on the same level as Diawolo? Rimuru wondered. Answer Sile responded immediately. 2 archdemons. Rimuru analyzed the situation. I'm not worried about defeating them, but if we fight here, the collateral damage will flatten the Great Jura Forest. In that case, I'll just change the venue. Rimuru snapped his fingers. Instantly, the 2 archdemons, Benimaru, Soai, Shun, and Rimuru vanished from the forest. A moment later, they materialized in an endless, empty realm, a dark, boundless expanse devoid of stars, terrain, or sunlight, the void dimension. The 2 demons paused, glancing around the empty space in confusion. Hey, Violet! Where on earth are we? The blonde demon asked, looking around. How should I know? The violet-haired demon, Violet, replied with annoyance. Those pathetic humans summoned us to destroy a country, and the next second we end up in this empty void. The country you were summoned to destroy is my nation, Rimuru spoke up, and I'm not going to let you touch it. Who said that? The blonde demon, Jorn, demanded, turning toward the voice. both archdemons turned to see three high-tier Kijin standing behind a silver-haired figure who was observing them with a cool, unbothered expression. "Pardon the delayed introduction," Rimuru said smoothly. "I am Demon Lord Rimuru Tempest. This is an isolated dimension of my own creation. Nothing leaves this space without my explicit permission." Dawn smirked, her eyes flashing with excitement. "I see. A demon lord, huh? I fought plenty of demon lords over the millennia, and you don't look any different." She dropped into a fluid combat stance. "So if we break you, we get to leave this boring space." "Sounds simple enough," Violet added, her dark mana rising around her dress. "I wouldn't underestimate me if I were you," Rimuru warned calmly. "That arrogance will be your downfall." The two primordial archdemons flared their dense magicules, filling the void with overwhelming pressure as they prepared to clash with the Demon Lord. Chapter 26: The battle reaches its conclusion. The confrontation between the Holy Knights and Tempest had finally reached its end, with Rimuru and his executives defeating all the paladins who challenged them. Now, Rimuru faced off against the two primordial archdemons summoned by the 7 Days clergy in a desperate attempt to destroy him. Looking across the dark expanse of the void dimension, Rimuru observed the raw aura emanating from the two demons and was thoroughly impressed. The yellow archdemon possessed the highest magicule density he had ever sensed outside of a true dragon. Mana poured continuously from her form in dense waves. The violet archdemon was no less formidable. While her total magicule output was lower than the yellow archdemon's, the refined structure of her aura demonstrated that she had perfected her control over her spirit energy. Rimuru estimated her magicule reserves to be slightly higher than Shin's current level. As Rimuru observed them, both archdemons readied themselves to attack, prompting him to raise his guard. The yellow archdemon closed the distance at superhuman speed, throwing a straight punch aimed directly at Rimuru's face. Rimuru casually stopped the blow with a single finger. Surprised that her strike was blocked so effortlessly, she did not let her momentum stall. Coating both hands in a dense yellow aura, she unleashed a blinding barrage of high-speed strikes. Rimuru deflected every strike using only his index finger, frustrating the yellow archdemon further. She leaped back, glaring at him in disbelief. "What is your finger made of?" she demanded. "It felt like I was punching solid orichalcum." Rimuru gave her a cool look, preparing to counterattack, when a notification echoed in his mind. Notice: A above activated bin death attribute has high tier position. Spell your. Rimuru looked up to see the violet archdemon hovering above, condensing a massive orb of death energy. She fired the compressed sphere straight down at Rimuru at supersonic speed. Rather than dodging, Rimuru took the attack head-on. Before the sphere made contact, he deployed a specialized barrier around Benimaru, Soai, and Shin to insulate them from the death energy. The sphere struck Rimuru, triggering a massive explosion that shook the entire dimensional space. Following the blast, a thick purple cloud of death energy expanded across the clearing. The violet archdemon descended, landing beside the yellow archdemon. "Do you think that finished him?" she asked. "There's only one way to find out," the yellow archdemon replied. The space trembled as the purple cloud began spiraling inward toward the center, revealing Rimuru standing with his hand outstretched. Utilizing Void God Azathoth, Rimuru devoured the entire cloud of death energy into his stomach space. Once the air cleared, he looked back at the two demons, who immediately raised their guards. A death attribute spell designed to bypass conventional physical defenses, Rimuru noted calmly. "Unfortunately for you, that type of magic has no effect on me." "Don't get cocky just because you survived one attack," the yellow archdemon snapped. "You're just a self-important demon lord." Rimuru ignored her outburst and continued, "I have a proposal for the two of you." "A proposal?" the violet archdemon asked cautiously. "I want both of you to become my subordinates," Rimuru offered. "You're both exceptionally strong and would make great additions to Tempest. What do you say?" The two archdemons exchanged a surprised glance, evaluating his sincerity. Finally, the yellow archdemon spoke. I will never serve someone weaker than myself, she declared. We demons value strength above all else, the violet archdemon added. If you want our allegiance, you must prove you are strong enough to subdue us in battle. Rimuru nodded. Fair enough. I'll defeat both of you and prove my strength. Try it if you can, the yellow archdemon shouted, flying into the air. She began channeling a massive quantity of magicules to cast her strongest spell. Seeing this, the violet archdemon ascended as well, maintaining a safe distance to observe the outcome of her ally's ultimate technique. The yellow archdemon compressed her magicules until the energy reached peak density. Gravity Collapse. Gravity Collapse was an advanced nuclear strike spell created by compressing a black flame core to unleash a flame of destruction. By hypercompressing the core, a localized supergravity field was generated, effectively creating a miniature, man-made black hole. The surrounding gravitational field warped violently, crushing anything caught within its radius. This was the yellow archdemon's most destructive spell. Instinct had warned her that the opponent before her was extraordinarily dangerous, a fact confirmed by how casually he had blocked her physical barrage. She knew she had to go all out to stand any chance. As the spell activated, gravity across the domain warped violently. The sheer pressure intensified to a level capable of pulverizing conventional matter instantly. Rimuru felt the sudden gravitational pressure collapse around him. For an ordinary target, the force would have been fatal. However, within seconds, Rimuru's physical vessel adapted to the pressure, allowing him to remain standing without strain. Looking around, Rimuru found himself surrounded by hyper-compressed spatial distortions resembling the interior of a gravitational singularity. Energy gathered rapidly toward a central focus point, erupting into a localized supernova that scorched the terrain. A dark pillar of energy connected the ground to the upper sky, generating heat that exceeded solar temperatures. What kind of spell is this, Sile? Rimuru asked internally. Answer. Gravity Collapse. Executing it magic, nuclear strike. This are all attribute and an attack. Catastrophic combines containment control, explosion. Gravitational in into is loss magical magicular phenomena physical precise requires result spell the this would. That's a dangerous technique, Rimuru thought. Does it pose any threat to us? Negative. Barrier. Dragon. Furthermore, master multidimensional true while an attack breach by cannot continuously high is magnitude of output physical protected raw the this vessel. I see. In that case. Rimuru drew his sword, channeling a fraction of his aura into the blade before executing a clean diagonal slash. From inside the barrier Rimuru had erected, Shun watched the battle closely. She was surprised by the magnitude of magicules contained within the spell, but her faith in her master remained absolute. Shun, you've been quiet for a while, Benimaru remarked. Are you worried about Lord Rimuru? Shun turned to Benimaru with a confident smile. Not at all. I'm simply looking forward to seeing how Lord Rimuru subdues these two. He intends to recruit them, so he won't use lethal force, so I added. Benimaru nodded. Indeed. Their power matches that of an awakened demon lord. Bringing them into our ranks will significantly strengthen Tempest. That's what I was thinking as well, Shun said enthusiastically. Frankly, we could use more high-tier female executives in Tempest. With them joining us, I won't be the only female commander capable of rivaling an awakened demon lord. What about Lady Milim? So I pointed out. She possesses immense strength. Lady Milim is Lord Rimuru's close ally and honored guest, Shun clarified. It is our duty to support her as well, as Lord Rimuru instructed. Focus, you two. Benimaru interjected, looking toward the center of the domain. Lord Rimuru is making his move. Up above, the yellow archdemon waited for the spell's full detonation, but the outcome defied her expectations. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the void, followed by a shockwave that blew back the surrounding energy. Her jaw dropped as the dense gravitational field of gravity collapse fractured into fragments and dissolved completely. Rimuru's single slash had severed the spell construct itself, causing a tremor to ripple across the physical space of the dimension. The yellow archdemon stood frozen. A nuclear strike spell had been neutralized by a casual sword swing. The sheer disparity in power reminded her of the primordial red. Before she could process the shock, the violet archdemon called out to her. "Get out of the way, Jawn! Move!" The yellow archdemon glanced over to see the violet archdemon condensing a massive reserve of purple magicules. She immediately disengaged, flying clear of the targeted area. The violet archdemon unleashed her magic. Hell Flare! A stream of dark purple fire flared to life, burning at extreme temperatures capable of vaporizing spiritual and physical structures alike. A massive magic array formed above Rimuru, raining the dark flames down upon him and melting the terrain into liquid slag. As the flames descended, Rimuru calmly activated his ultimate ability. Void God Azathoth. With a single command, the dark fire and the underlying magic array were consumed entirely into Rimuru's stomach space. Sile immediately processed and neutralized the absorbed magicules. Both archdemons stared in absolute shock. The yellow archdemon finally lost her composure. "What on earth are you?" she shouted down at him. "How can you just erase spells like that?" Rimuru offered a faint smile. "Wouldn't you like to know?" "It doesn't matter what trick you used," the violet archdemon insisted, trying to maintain her stance. "Cancelling attacks of that scale must require a massive amount of energy." "Don't make assumptions," Rimuru replied calmly. "That didn't take even a fraction of my full capacity." Both demons froze at his statement. "You're bluffing," the yellow archdemon yelled, pointing at him. "You're trying to deceive us." Rimuru smirked. "Am I? Let me demonstrate, then. I'll use a technique I adapted after observing the Holy Knight Sayer's magic. Let's see if you can hold out against it." The two archdemons braced themselves, raising their magicule defenses to maximum output. Rimuru raised his hand, illuminating the dark void with radiant light. Beams of pure holy energy descended from above, converging directly on the two primordial demons. This is holy attribute magic, which is naturally effective against spiritual life forms like demons, Rimuru remarked. "I hope you survive it." The light intensified, enveloping both archdemons and flooding the entire domain with brilliant energy. When the light eventually faded, both demons were lying on the ground, their bodies smoking and their magicules thoroughly depleted. Rimuru walked over and looked down at them. "Had enough." The yellow archdemon looked up weakly. "I yield. I accept you as my master." The violet archdemon nodded slowly. "I yield as well." Rimuru smiled and extended his hands toward them. A soft light enveloped their forms, instantly restoring their stamina and repairing their physical vessels. Once again, the two archdemons were left stunned by his capabilities. "Master, is there anything you cannot do?" the yellow archdemon asked quietly. "I'll leave you two to figure that out," Rimuru replied with a slight smile. "Now then, what are your names?" The two demons exchanged a glance before looking back at Rimuru. "We do not possess formal names, Master," the violet archdemon answered. "People usually refer to me as the Yellow Demon or Jawn, but those are just designations, not true names," the yellow archdemon explained. Rimuru nodded in understanding. "In that case, how about I bestow formal names upon you both?" "Are you certain, Master?" the violet archdemon asked. "A naming of that scale requires immense magicules." "Don't worry about it," Rimuru assured them. "You are my subordinates now, and as your master, it's my responsibility to name you." The yellow archdemon smiled. "Thank you very much, Master." Rimuru spread his dragon wings and unleashed his unsuppressed aura. The sheer pressure of a true dragon settled over the dimension, forcing both archdemons to their knees. "Is this our master's true form?" The yellow archdemon thought, overwhelmed by the pressure. "This power is unbelievable. We never stood a chance from the start." he was holding back the entire time, the violet archdemon realized, a faint smile touching her lips. I am glad to serve someone of this magnitude. Rimuru extended his hands toward them, channeling his dark aura around their forms. Normally, demons require a physical medium to manifest permanently in the mortal realm. But with my power, that restriction does not apply. I am Rimuru Tempest, a true dragon. A brilliant light wrapped around both demons as their physical vessels were restructured from the ground up, evolving their spiritual bodies and granting them permanent physical forms. I have recreated your vessels and granted you bodies suitable to serve me. From this day forth, the yellow demon shall be known as Carrere, and the purple demon shall be known as Ultima. Serve me well. The radiant aura vanished, bestowing a massive quantity of magicules upon them both. Their attire transformed into refined uniforms, and their magicule capacities expanded dramatically. Opening their eyes, Carrere and Ultima looked up at Rimuru with bright, resolute expressions. We swear to serve you faithfully for all eternity, Lord Rimuru, Carrere declared, bowing low. Likewise, my lord, Ultima added, bowing beside her. Rimuru nodded, then turned back toward Benimaru, so I, Anshin, deactivating the surrounding barrier. The three executives walked over to join Rimuru and his newly named subordinates. Congratulations on your victory, Lord Rimuru, Benimaru said respectfully. I never doubted you for a moment, Lord Rimuru, Shun said enthusiastically. Rimuru smiled sheepishly at Shun's energy. Everyone, meet Ultima and Carrere, my newest subordinates. Benimaru extended his hand toward Carrere. It is a pleasure to meet you both. I am Benimaru, commander of Tempest's military forces. Carrere shook his hand firmly. The pleasure is mine, Benimaru. I am Carrere, serving Lord Rimuru. Shun leaned down and pulled Ultima into a sudden, tight hug from behind. My name is Shun, the first secretary to Lord Rimuru. You're quite cute, aren't you? Why does she always emphasize first secretary whenever she introduces herself? Rimuru thought, shaking his head slightly. Ultima smiled politely despite the tight hug. Thank you for the compliment, Shun. I am Ultima, and I look forward to working alongside you. All right, now that introductions are complete, let's head back, Rimuru said. They all nodded in agreement. Rimuru snapped his fingers, deactivating the void dimension and transporting the group back to the Great Jura Forest. Chapter 27, Absolute Power. Rimuru and his party teleported back to the clearing in the Great Jura Forest, where a parallel existence of Rimuru had been standing guard over the unconscious Hinata Sakaguchi. The parallel existence technique was an application synthesized by Sile after analyzing spatial motion and multiformation abilities, allowing Rimuru to maintain multiple functional physical manifestations simultaneously. Upon the main party's arrival, the parallel existence dissolved into light, leaving the original Rimuru standing before the group. Rimuru approached Hinata, flanked by Benimaru, Soai, Shun, and his two newly named subordinates, Carrere and Ultima. Kneeling beside her, Rimuru extended his hand, channeling a soft stream of magicules into her form. Within moments, Hinata opened her eyes and sat up sharply. Checking her body, she found her physical wounds completely healed and her stamina fully restored. She looked up to see Rimuru standing nearby alongside his executives and two unfamiliar figures. What happened? Hinata asked, her voice quiet. I was certain you were going to execute me. Rimuru stood up and walked back toward his subordinates. I considered it initially, but I couldn't bring myself to kill Shishu's former student. Regardless of how you view me, I have no desire to remain at war with you or the Western nations. How am I supposed to believe that after what happened to my knights? Hinata murmured. Your forces launched an unsanctioned invasion into my territory, and we responded accordingly, Rimuru replied calmly. However, it's clear now that both of us were being manipulated by an outside party. Fortunately, the orchestrators behind the conflict have been dealt with. Suddenly, a heavy shockwave rattled the forest floor as something descended from the sky at extreme velocity. Carrere and Ultima immediately shifted into combat stances, placing themselves in front of Rimuru. Meanwhile, Rimuru, Benimaru, Soai, and Shun remained completely relaxed, having already identified the incoming magicule signature long before impact. As the dust settled, Milim Nova emerged, casually carrying Luminous Valentine over her shoulder. Milim dropped the vampire lord onto the ground without concern and rushed forward, leaping into Rimuru's arms and wrapping him in a tight hug. Rimuru, though surprised by Luminous' disheveled state, returned the embrace warmly. Seeing that Milim posed no threat to their master, Carrere and Ultima stood down and observed the interaction. Rimuru held Milim close, resting his face against her shoulder with a warm smile. "It hasn't been that long, but I missed you." Milim beamed, leaning into him. "I felt the same way, Rimuru. I missed you immensely." Rimuru pulled back slightly and kissed her. Milim closed her eyes, completely melting into the gesture, indifferent to the audience surrounding them. Carrere watched the scene with mild intrigue. Lord Rimuru appears to have completely captivated Demon Lord Milim Nova. Ultima nodded in agreement. Indeed. Their bond is remarkably deep. They are formally engaged, Shun informed the two demons proudly. Nearby, Luminous stood up, dusting off her clothing while her passive regeneration slowly closed her surface wounds. She glanced over at Hinata, who was staring at Rimuru and Milim with a visible blush. Luminous let out a tired sigh. "Hinata!" Hinata snapped out of her stupor, suddenly realizing the state Luminous was in. Panicking, she rushed to her side. "Lady Luminous! Are you all right? You're covered in injuries." "Calm yourself, Hinata," Luminous replied, adjusting her attire. "These minor wounds will heal shortly." Hinata stepped back respectfully as Luminous walked up to Rimuru and Milim, who were still standing together. "I dislike interrupting romantic displays, but we have urgent matters to address," Rimuru, Luminous stated flatly. Recognizing they had an audience, Rimuru ended the kiss. Milim pouted briefly, but Rimuru gave her a gentle peck on the cheek to appease her, which instantly restored her cheerful mood. Rimuru turned to Luminous, raising an eyebrow at her battered appearance. "Luminous? This is unexpected. What happened to you?" Luminous' expression darkened. "Why don't you ask your fiancé? She certainly knows the details." Shun frowned slightly at Luminous' sharp tone toward Rimuru, but remained silent, knowing better than to cause a scene over a misunderstanding, especially with Diawolo absent. Rimuru looked back at Milim, bewildered. "Milim, what is she referring to?" "Well, I saw a large force of holy knights marching toward Tempest in battle array," Milim explained proudly, crossing her arms. "Naturally, I assumed Luminous was launching an unprovoked attack against your nation. So I flew directly to Nightgarden and beat her up with every intention of eliminating her. But she kept insisting she never issued an invasion order. So, I brought her here directly to verify her claim." Milim puffed out her chest, clearly expecting praise for her intervention. Rimuru stood frozen, processing the chaotic sequence of events. While he appreciated Milim's protective instincts, she had completely steamrolled a demon lord who turned out to be innocent. Sighing softly, Rimuru tapped Milim gently on the top of her head. "Oh. What was that for, Rimuru?" Milim asked, rubbing her head. "You jumped to conclusions far too quickly," Rimuru said with a sigh. Luminous had nothing to do with the attack. The entire invasion was orchestrated by the 7 Days clergy to manipulate Hinata and eliminate her. The clergy members have already been dealt with, so the misunderstanding is resolved. Milim let out a small "oh," quietly turning away from Luminous' glare while attempting to whistle innocently. Rimuru turned back to Luminous with an apologetic expression. "I deeply apologize for the trouble Milim caused you on my account. I hope you can forgive her rashness." Luminous glared at Milim for a moment longer before letting out a heavy sigh. "It is not as though I possess the power to enforce retribution against her. However, simple apologies will not restore my domain or return the lives lost during her assault." Rimuru thought for a moment before offering, What if I restore your domain and resurrect everyone who fell during the attack, as a formal apology on her behalf? Everyone present froze, staring at Rimuru in utter disbelief. What did you just say, Rimuru? Luminous asked cautiously. Exactly as I said. I can restore Nightgarden to its original state and bring back all the citizens Milim killed. Do you truly possess the authority to restore life to spiritual life forms whose souls were dispersed by a true dragon's offspring? Luminous asked, her voice laced with intense skepticism. Rimuru offered a calm smile. Reconstructing lost soul data is manageable for me. Do you accept the arrangement? Luminous was left speechless. Restoring destroyed souls and reconstructing physical vessels was a feat reserved exclusively for creation legends. If you possess such capability, then please do so, Luminous answered honestly. I would be immensely grateful. Karea smirked, looking at Rimuru with growing awe. Is there truly no limit to Lord Rimuru's authority? At this point, nothing he does would surprise me, Ultima added. Shen smiled proudly at the two archdemons. Lord Rimuru's power transcends ordinary comprehension. He stands above all. Benimaru nodded in agreement. You two are still adapting to his presence, but this is merely a demonstration of Lord Rimuru's true capabilities. Indeed, Karea chuckled. Joining his ranks was undoubtedly the correct choice. Agreed, Ultima said softly. My total magicule capacity tripled the moment he bestowed my name. I will follow him without hesitation. Hearing his subordinate's absolute trust, Rimuru smiled faintly before facing Luminous again. All right, let's begin. Wait, Lord Rimuru. Hinata interrupted suddenly. What is it, Hinata? Hinata dropped to her knees, bowing her head deeply. Could you also resurrect the paladins who fell during our assault on your territory? Rimuru considered the request briefly before nodding. Very well. I will restore your fallen knights, with the exception of Guard, who Diolo confirmed was actively conspiring with the 7 Days clergy. Overwhelmed with relief, Hinata bowed lower. Your mercy is far greater than we deserve. I am deeply sorry for the crisis we brought upon your nation. I could have handled the initial encounter with more diplomacy as well, Rimuru replied smoothly. Stand up, Hinata. Hinata rose and returned to Luminous' side. Luminous reached over and gently grasped Hinata's hand, offering a silent gesture of comfort that Hinata accepted without hesitation. Rimuru turned to his companions. Everyone, please step back a few paces. The group retreated, with Milim, Shen, Karea, and Ultima watching intently. Luminous and Hinata stepped back as well, eager to observe how Rimuru intended to execute the resurrection. Once everyone was clear, Rimuru closed his eyes and began focusing his internal reserves. A sudden wave of dense magicules erupted from his form, creating a localized pressure wave that caused the surrounding atmosphere to heavy. Hinata nearly collapsed under the sheer weight of the aura, but Luminous instantly deployed a protective barrier around her to stabilize her physical form. Now do you understand why I strictly forbade you from engaging him in combat? Luminous asked quietly. Hinata nodded, utterly stunned. I had no idea he possessed this level of power. It's unlike anything in recorded history. What you are sensing now is still heavily suppressed, Luminous revealed. This does not represent a fraction of the power he displayed during the Walpurgis banquet. Hinata fell silent, coming to terms with the reality that Rimuru existed on a plane far beyond human capability. Karea and Ultima overheard the exchange, their admiration for their master only deepening. Sile, I'm entrancing the magicule management to you, Rimuru communicated internally. Understood, Lord because fate. Ilubelius Master. Milim Nova, skill Ultimata by citizens completely dispersed execute insufficient. Is a process reality retrieval rewriting shall soul spatial standard structures the utilizing were. I'm relying on you, Sile. Using universal sense, Rimuru mapped the geographic coordinates of Lubelius and identified the exact spatial points required for reconstruction. He raised his hands as arc lightning began crackling across his form. Lord of Fate! The sky above darkened instantly as a massive, intricate magic array manifested across the entire canopy of the great Jura forest. Reality itself seemed to bend as divine light poured down from the magic circle. Particles of dense magicules condensed around the clearing, taking physical form. Within seconds, the dust solidified into the physical vessels of the paladins who had fallen in combat earlier. The terrain damage during the battle smoothed out, completely restoring itself. The reconstructed paladins opened their eyes, looking around in utter bewilderment. Simultaneously, the exact same miraculous reconstruction occurred across the territory of Lubelius. The onlookers stood frozen, unable to process what they had witnessed. This was not simple healing or standard resurrection magic, it was fundamental reality manipulation and vessel creation, a realm of power previously thought to belong solely to the creator dragon. Rimuru lowered his hands, checking the internal feedback. Hey Sile, why didn't we use turn null for this process? Notice. Null skill the turn ultimate utilizing alternative analytical application chaotic collapse. Completed deep delicate energy environmental for it matter of optimization. Pathways. Profile reconstruction remains risk successfully underusing was wide scale. Got it. Thanks for handling it, partner. It master. Absolute duty is my. Meanwhile, the resurrected paladins looked around at Rimuru and his executives in complete shock. What happened? Arnor muttered, looking at his hands. I have no idea, Bacchus replied, equally stunned. I was certain my spiritual core was destroyed. Are we alive? Lytus asked, checking her body. It appears so, Fritz said, staring toward Rimuru. And it looks like the demon lord is responsible. As the knights murmured among themselves, Rimuru stepped forward to address them. I understand you all have questions, Rimuru announced, his voice carrying clearly across the clearing. You were killed in battle, but at the request of Hinata and Luminous, I have fully reconstructed your bodies and restored your souls. The conflict between our nations was engineered by the 7 days clergy to eliminate Hinata. The clergy has been eradicated. Let this serve as a final reminder, do not launch unprovoked attacks against Tempest again, or we will respond in full. The paladins looked at one another before bowing deeply as one. Thank you, Demon Lord Rimuru. Luminous approached Rimuru once more. And my nation. Every structure and citizen destroyed during Milim's assault has been completely restored, Rimuru confirmed. Milim immediately wrapped her arms around Rimuru from behind, leaning her head on his shoulder. My darling Rimuru! Is there truly nothing beyond your capability? Rimuru chuckled, turning around to hold her comfortably. I wouldn't go that far. I'm certainly not omnipotent. Milim smiled, looking at him with deep affection. It doesn't matter to me. To me, you will always be the greatest. She leaned up and kissed him gently. Once the kiss ended, Rimuru invited Luminous, Hinata, and the Paladin leadership to follow him back to Tempest to formally negotiate a permanent peace treaty between the Holy Empire of Lubelius and the Jura Tempest Federation. Meanwhile, deep within a hidden cavern system in Gistav, Laplace stood in complete disbelief as an absolute nightmare unfolded before his eyes. Gathered with him were Kigali, Tear, Footman, and Yuki Totsuya. Yuki had brought them to the ancient cavern claiming to have located an ancient seal containing an entity known in obscure legends as a primordial deity. According to Yuki's information, unsealing the entity would grant them absolute power. Utilizing his anti-skill, Yuki had neutralized the ancient barrier with ease. However, the moment the seal shattered, their plan collapsed into horror. The entity bound within the seal was vastly different from what they had anticipated. Before anyone could react, a figure blurred through the chamber, reappearing directly behind Yuki and thrusting a hand completely through his chest from behind. The sheer pressure of the entity's released magicule slammed into the chamber, forcing Laplace, Kigali, Tear, and Footman to their knees under the crushing gravitational weight. Only Yuki remained suspended, coughing up blood as he hung from the entity's arm. Yuki looked back weakly at his attacker. What is this? How can there be another one of you? The female entity smiled coldly down at him. That is irrelevant to you, Yuki. All that matters is that I am free, thanks to your foolish willingness to believe a fable I left behind centuries ago. Goodbye. Dark, absolute flames ignited from her hand, engulfing Yuki completely. Within a fraction of a second, his body, soul, and magicules were erased from existence, leaving not even ash behind. The entity turned her gaze toward the remaining clowns pinned to the floor. Now, for the rest of you. Realizing they were completely outmatched, Laplace forced every ounce of his remaining energy into a single spatial transport circle directly beneath Tear, who was struggling against the pressure. You have to get out of here, Tear! Laplace roared through gritted teeth. Warn Demon Lord Rimuru. Tell him the calamity has breached the seal. Tear cried out in horror, but before she could resist, the activation sequence completed, teleporting her instantly out of the cavern complex. The entity watched the teleportation fade, entirely indifferent. With a casual wave of her hand, intense black flames swept across the cavern, instantly incinerating Laplace, Kigali, and Footman, erasing their existences entirely. Stepping out of the cavern entrance, the entity looked out across the horizon, inhaling the open air with a cruel smile. Centuries of confinement, finally at an end, she murmured to herself. Now, I shall claim Milim for myself and eliminate Rimuru. He is the sole obstacle remaining in my path. He may possess formidable abilities, but he holds something I require, and I will take it by force. She expanded her aura, causing the sky above Gistav to blacken with tempestuous energy. I am coming for you, Milim. Across the continent in Tempest, no one detected the distant eruption of magicules, except for Sile. Sile thought quietly within Rimuru's spirit core. Aye, if master, absolute again. And attempts before, bound consequences. Do erasure, execute harm her my of once regardless shall she so that a will.